The Patreon content.
Voices.
The stuff that's only for patrons. Thank you for being a patron.
Oh, hello, everyone. You have Kempa, and I am here today interviewing a very special guest in Ilonka Zlatar. You are president of 350 Sacramento, which is a very well-known environmental organization, correct?
That's very generous of you to say. Yeah, I would say we're the largest organization in Sacramento working on climate action and climate justice.
Yeah, I think 350 does amazing work. But the reason we have you here today is for this very special interview episode is to discuss Measure A. You are a part of Measure A, not okay. So that leads me to believe you don't like it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're not huge fans. In fact, we are anti-fans of
Got
this
it.
measure. And we are here to tell you all about it as to why you should also be a huge not fan as well.
I as a fellow member of the community who is against a vowel measure, I'm really excited to have you here today. Let's get right into it, because Measure A is kind of a confusing measure. It's countywide. It's regarding a tax of some kind, and what it appears to do in this tax is put money towards what they say, I guess, is infrastructure. Why don't you just lay it out for us? What is it? What is Measure A?
Measure A is a half-cent sales tax. So right there, right off the bat, you're starting with something that's regressive, meaning
Regressive.
it's for people the hardest, right? People who make the least amount of money, who need to buy like stuff in Sacramento County to live, are hardest hit by this sales tax. So it's a half-cent sales tax that would generate funding for 40 years for transportation projects in the county of Sacramento.
And this would generate something like $8.5 billion, give or take?
Over the 40-year lifespan, it would generate about over the 40 years, it would generate about $8.5 billion. So it's
okay.
Big bucks with a big B that it would
That's a lot of money
for transportation projects. Yeah.
And what are these transportation projects?
Yeah, so the tricky thing about it is that this was brought forward as a citizens measure, which means that people signed a petition to get it on the ballot. But the people who are behind this measure are not so much just regular Joes or transportation advocates at all. It was sort of a conglomerate between developers and the county, who tried to pass a similar transportation measure 2 years ago, but failed because the county or any government body actually needs a 2/3 majority to pass a new tax, whereas a citizens measure only needs a simple majority of 50% to pass.
So we have a loophole for the county, the Board of Soups, the CEO of the county, who might want this for their, I guess, infrastructure projects. But would it also be like dealing with existing infrastructure as well, like roads and stuff? Okay.
Yeah. So if you got your handy dandy voter information guide for the county in the mail, you can read all about it. So basically, off the top, like any money that comes in from this measure would go to some sort of big, like regional projects. And whether or not you can consider those infrastructure is kind of iffy. Like there's a mobility center, which is supposed to do like job training. There's work on the American River Parkway to do some conservation. So there's pieces that are good that we like in there. But what we don't like is that there's such a big focus on expanding freeways specifically for the purpose of building massive developments in rural land. So we call that sprawl, right?
Right.
Like our city, we have our urban core that really needs investment, and we really need transportation funding and projects in the city and in the urban corridors where people actually live. But what this would do is actually take funding away from that urban core and shunt it out into areas that are currently undeveloped.
Oh,
So
I'm starting to see where this is going. As an environmentalist guest, that is probably not something that we would like in 2022, while we have this climate crisis barreling down on us, while we have fires every year and a warmer and warmer Sacramento. This sounds initially like it's starting to fly in the face of all of our climate initiatives that are happening here in California.
absolutely. So we are in the throes of the climate crisis, and it's going to continue to get worse every year. So if you thought this summer was hot, this is probably the coldest summer that we will know going forward. So that's sort of a scary thought, but
Yeah.
so we know that we have to do things differently. Like we can't continue the same pattern of sprawl in suburbia land that we've done so far, because we know that just locks in more vehicles, and we know that just everybody driving EVs is also not an answer, right? We need smarter development. We need infill in our existing urban areas so that people don't have to have a car in order to survive, right? Our cities these days and our counties and our urban developments are not built for people. They're built for cars, right? So like, how can we like refocus our priorities on spending this type of funding, not on continuing this pattern of like sprawling even farther and farther out into the important agricultural and conservation lands that we need to like absorb this climate pollution out of the air, but invest it into making the city core an affordable, walkable place where people are happy to live and can get around without having to have a car. I mean, we have a good example in Midtown, right? Like a lot of people in Midtown don't even have cars. Like they don't need to have a car because they can get around and get everything they need. Why don't we have
Midtown,
more
for the
Midtown?
listener who's not in the Sacramento region, it is the downtown city center that is incredibly walkable, and all amenities can be reached on foot. Okay, so this sounds like a not great thing for a lot of reasons now, right? You've discussed this regressive tax, which tends to be the case in more conservative regions. They tax our lower classes to have to do some kind of effort. It would fund this kind of connector between Elk Grove, which is south of Sacramento, all the way up to the foothills in the Folsom area, right?
Correct. Yeah. So that's a big chunk of the spending that they want to put forward is to the Southeast Connector, which is a highway that they want to expand, connecting Elk Grove to Folsom. And the main reason they want to do that is there's all this beautiful, pristine land out there that they want to build a massive development called Jackson Township and even others in the future. So they basically want to make new cities where they don't currently exist.
Okay. Now, this is all wrong. This is all fucking backwards for what is good for the people of the Sacramento region and for California. Or at least you've convinced me so far of this. But why? What would be the impetus to put forward a measure that would be so harmful for so many people?
Well, as you probably guessed it, Kempa, it's money. these developers, the main proponent of this measure is the Cordova Hills Development Corporation, and a couple of other developers, and the Alliance for Jobs, which represents construction industry. So all of these people that are putting this measure forward stand to benefit financially from it happening.
Yep.
They will get to build homes and build freeways in where they want, where they were able to get a huge piece of land for cheap because it was outside of the urban growth boundary, meaning, a while back, the city and the county said, okay, we're not going to build beyond these boundaries. So land that was acquired outside of that boundary was not meant to be developed. We determined for a number of reasons, flood risk, for mitigation, for wildlife, for agriculture, for food production. We determined that those areas were not supposed to be developed. And yet we have developers that buy this land. This is what we call land speculation, right? Like you're buying land that's currently not worth very much, hoping that you can change the rules to your favor.
Right.
So that you can then do stuff that wasn't supposed to be done in there and make a ton of money. So that's what we're seeing there. And sadly, we have a board of supervisors that is very friendly, very well backed and funded by these developers who loves to give them exemptions to this rule. So they're like, oh, you bought that land? Cool. Yeah, go ahead and build on it. No problem. So they give those exemptions. And so we're continuing to see these sprawl developments happening, even though we have the policies in place to prevent that.
Okay. This all sounds like a big problem. So these developers, they're probably not public policy experts. I'm sure folks know that. So what do? They hire basically hired guns in politics here in the Sacramento region who are fairly amoral to do their bidding. In this case, they hired a man named Josh Wood, who runs Region Business. Josh is also one of the main people behind the incredibly harmful and violent Measure O. And they hired a David Townsend, I believe, is another one. David Townsend is of I Street Public Affairs, and he and Wood actually share the same office space. So this did not surprise me at all. They go forward. They're the ones who know how to do kind of the public policy chicanery that will push something forward. And they know the machinations, and they have the phone numbers of all of our city and county officials. So these folks are all working in tandem for this. What I guess beyond, just this profit motive, this is also, as you said, harmful to the environment. There are very obvious reasons why that's harmful, but them breaking some rules here, aren't there some policy repercussions for us in the future as far as funding goes from state and federal levels?
Absolutely. Before I answer that question, though, I want to touch on what you said about
Go ahead.
These machinations and the things that people do to get something to sound good, right? So obviously the people who wrote this measure are very smart, and they're very well connected, and they've used that to make this sound very good. And they've done that by really playing to the dire need that we have in this region for transportation funding. And so they went to everyone who needs transportation funding in different cities and in our regional transit system and gave them some breadcrumbs, right? And they said, we'll give you this many millions out of this billions of funding. And so they got them to sign on, and they got them who were so desperate, because our transportation system in Sacramento County is desperately underfunded. Like Sacramento City has some of the lowest public transportation budgets of any city of our size. And that's only counting within our city boundaries, not like the metro area that we actually serve, right? So our regional transit system and our public transportation system are woefully underfunded. So of course, whenever somebody comes up and says, hey, what if I give you some money? Regional transit RT really put a lot of their eggs into that basket.
Yeah, it's like a starving baby bird, you know? It's like, of course, please give me that.
And they've done the same with some of our city council members, right? So they've put things into this that they want, like this regional transit or this regional mobility center that some of our council members are really excited about. They've put some funding into that to hook them in, right? So they're obviously very smart, they're strategic, and they're going piece by piece, picking up folks and just putting little bits into this measure to get them to sign on. So just wanted to highlight that there are good pieces in there, but they're small. They're small. And the overall outcome, which is what I'm going to get to next, your other question, what can we lose if this actually passes? So we talked about earlier how the county sort of tried this before, right? And so they had a whole list of transportation projects that they want to fund. And all the cities have this whole list of transportation projects that they want to fund, which suspiciously familiar, those same projects are in this measure. So like, how is this a citizens measure if it's all of the like county's projects and the city's projects that are written in there? Interesting. But so there's this whole list of projects that they want to fund. And we know from our metropolitan planning organization is called SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments.
I always forget that too. Yeah.
The Sacramento Area Council of Governments. They do the like planning and the analysis for our transportation system in the region, the 6th county region. And their own analysis of all of these projects shows us that if they are built, we would not meet our carbon reduction, our emission and pollution reduction targets that are set by the state. So the state has these targets and they say, you have to meet these reduction targets in your emissions or else you don't get state funding. And now there's even federal funding that is adding similar levels of performance that you need to meet in order to get more funding. So if this passes and these projects are built, we will actually lose out on billions of dollars of state and federal funding for future transportation projects that we need.
God. And then on top of that, we have like all these new, like new vehicles coming through, things like that. Sacramento already year in and year out has among the top 10 worst air qualities in cities throughout our country. So you've laid it out incredibly well that, this is not only horrible from an environmental perspective, it's fiscally incredibly irresponsible, except for the couple of developers and the political consultants that they're paying. And on top of that, and stop me if there's like anything else we need to add, but on top of that, I think there's something else to add here, that this is kind of a perversion of the democratic process, right? This is not what a like citizen signature gathering initiative was meant to look like, where these like incredibly rich people throw millions of dollars down to force something onto a measure onto our ballots.
I want to flag the one other big thing that we haven't fully talked about yet, which is how this impacts people in Sacramento, right? So we talked about rural lands, we talked about conservation, we talked about funding, but at the end of the day, what this measure is going to do is take funding away from the city core and into the suburbs. And while doing that, now you have more people commuting in and out, which means more cars, more smog, more pollution, more opportunities for kids to get asthma. So this is, and because we're sort of deprioritizing urban development, now we're seeing, degradation in the level of services and access for people who live in the city. So who's going to buy the homes out in the boonies?
Right.
It's not going to be poor people.
Right.
They're not going to be buying these brand new houses out there. So lower income people who are in the city are going to see their services go away, and they're going to see much more pollution that is going to impact their health. And that's for all, like, obviously the pollution impacts all of us, but especially those who live closest to the freeways, especially those who live in already overburdened areas of the city, which are primarily people of color, communities of color.
People of color, low income, and
low income.
I mean, like you said, it's a public health hazard for them. You know, our co-host Flo talks about things like this all the time. Yeah, so incredibly harmful, right? Could you talk a little bit about this kind of bastardization of the democratic process?
Yes, I absolutely can. After I also add that the amount of budget that is going to accessibility services for the differently abled in our community. So, like, a disproportionate number of people who have mobility issues rely on public transit as a primary means of transportation. And in our current, because we already have a 50-cent sales tax currently in Sacramento County that is providing transportation services. In our current one, the disabled and special needs service is 5% of that budget. And this is actually suggesting to drop that down to 3%. So we are also directly impacting our future ability to serve those who most need and most rely on public transit. And we're reducing that by almost half of the level that it's currently at.
I don't know. It's just like we rant about this shit all the time on this show. It's just, it is incredible to me how gross the policy coming from those folks on I Street is, like, year in and year out. I don't know. It just, that one really pisses me
right. So
off.
how is this billed as a citizen's measure, right? How is this a citizen's measure? There are no citizens that sat around and made this up.
Right.
This was a deal between developers and political analysts and the county, and perhaps elected, I don't know specifically, perhaps elected officials from county. What we do know for sure, though, is, and I was sitting in these meetings, is that Mayor Steinberg, when he first caught whiff of this citizens measure happening,
this is the mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg.
The mayor of Sacramento. He said, "Oh, wait, this is not good. We need to fight this. We need to oppose this." So he called us all up. He called all the different environmental and transit advocacy and disability rights advocates up. And he called us up and he was like, "We need to fight this. Measure A is going to be really terrible." And we were like, "Oh my God, yeah, it is. Like, let's do this. Let's fight this thing together." And he said, "Okay, let me go see what this is about. We're going to get back together." We never heard from him again. So we had 1 or 2 meetings with the mayor, and he got us all talking to each other, which is good, I guess.
Yeah.
And then he was like, "BRB," and just
bailed.
Ghosted.
Isn't he suddenly for it now, or no? Or is he just quiet on it? Okay. So
He's
it's
for it now. So
Josh and David Townsend turned him into a pod person, and now we have pod person Darrell.
Well, that Darrell loves to make a deal, right? If Darrell Steinberg is known for anything, is his love for being known as someone who makes deals. So what he did was he ran over to the people putting on the measure And because there was like, what he was most concerned about apparently was that basically the projects that are listed, and this is true for any proposition, any ballot measure, when voters vote on it, it is going to be implemented as written. Like there will
Right.
be absolutely no wiggle room to be like, oh, actually, that was not really a good idea. Let's like tweak it, change it. No, no, no. Any ballot measure, as soon as the people approve it, it is written in stone. So unlike laws or regulations that can be like amended through a process, like ballot measures, they are to stay as they are. So as it was written, it basically said, so in our region, like, or in California, any big transportation projects need to be approved by the regional transportation organizations,
Right.
which are government entities. But this measure set it up a joint powers authority, which basically means that they would give themselves the power to approve these projects that are already listed in the measure. So it would sort of skip a piece of oversight to make sure that it is complying with our goals and targets and plans as a region, right? So it was
Wow.
basically set up to be completely like self-sufficient so that it could skip government oversight.
Wow.
So Daryl went in and negotiated with them to sort of perhaps address that piece of the terrible of all of the terrible pieces of it. He negotiated a memorandum of understanding. So this is a side document that none of us have seen. They some sort of contract saying, oh, actually, we're still going to be subject to review from the regional planning agency. But that's not in the measure.
Right.
So after he did that, he negotiated this letter. He got everybody to sign it. He also talked about adding even more money to the mobility center that he likes. And then now he's for it.
Now he's for it. This sounds very much like the Daryl I know. This MOU, nobody publicly has seen it, or
I haven't seen it.
okay.
I remember asking, and I don't remember the answer to like, have we seen it?
Now, basically, it's like we intend to, build in the oversight after this passes. Is that what we're kind of hearing here?
Right. So the MOU is like, yeah, we're gonna do the oversight thing.
This reminds me of if folks remember Measure U from a few years back, which basically was a new tax that what we all kind of knew was going to, go straight to SAC PD, the cops, funding them. But they built into Measure U this Measure U kind of committee of citizens that would discuss where the money from that would be going. And before, as they were still writing the legislation, they could have changed it so that they actually had teeth. There was actually oversight. And they refused to do it, but they said, oh, we will give you teeth after this passes. People had to trust them. Measure U passed, and they fucked everyone over. There is no teeth to the Measure U committee. And no offense to Flo, who is the chair of that. And she uses Measure U as like an incredible bully pulpit. But like what we always wanted was some kind of citizen community oversight. And this just feels like more of that same bullshit.
I mean, there is no citizens community oversight.
Not with this one, yeah. But there is this promise of like, oh, there will be oversight after we pass this. And it's like, how many times can we allow them to fool us on shit like this,
Yeah.
Can I ask, who are like you have built a pretty broad coalition against Measure A. Can you tell me some of the groups that have come together against it, and for what reasons? Because I think there are some strange bedfellows here.
Yeah, I would say we have both the Democratic and the Republican Party against this measure. We have farmers and we have anti-tax, taxpayer groups,
Libertarian types.
The Sacramento Bee is with us, the editorial board, and sort of the people who you would expect coming from my mouth, all of the environmental and transit advocacy groups, so the Sierra Club, ECOS, the Environmental Council of Sacramento, Coalition for Clean Air, United Latinos, Indivisible, Queer Democrats, Climate Plan.
Yeah, Andres.
Even some architecture firms and all sorts of folks. So it's a pretty diverse group. And I must say that, like, when we first got together, all of us who are, woefully underfunded and over capacity and overstretched and never sleep, like, this describes all of the people that I just said. We kept sort of talking about it, like, okay, but who's gonna do this? Like, right. But who's actually gonna run this opposition campaign? Because like none of us can, right? Yeah. Nose go, like none of us can do this. And then it got to the point where we were like, okay, like we know that none of us can do this, but all of us maybe can. So we just pulled together literally a month and a half ago, maybe. Wow. Is when we officially decided that we were doing this. And they have a $7 million budget for their fancy mailers that they've been sending out to everybody, claiming that this is a climate solution. Right. We've raised like $6,000 in our campaign budget through just like literally people giving $150, $50 here and there.
Yeah, people power.
And I literally just made 30 like banners in my backyard with like 7 people. Like, we're just like making banners by hand because we don't have money to actually buy banners to like put around town. So this is as grassroots as it fucking gets. Okay. Yeah. Like it's literally like fucking 10 people who like come to our like coalition meeting and then they activate some other like 10 people. Like it's these groups that like see how terrible this is, and we are not well organized, we are not powerful, and we are not well funded. So we really need our community to come together on this. We really need like every single person who is listening to this right now to go to measureanotokay.org and to sign up to volunteer, to just take a picture or like put something on your social media about Measure A, because literally I was talking to somebody from my dance class about Measure A, and she said, I've looked for information about Measure A on the opposition side and I cannot find it. Like, we're so underfunded. We can't even, like, we don't even show up on Google. Okay. So we really need the people power on this. So we really need everybody to like pitch in and post about it, talk about it, tell someone about it. We have flyers, we have yard signs, we have banners. If you go to our website, Measure A Not Okay, and that's just the letter O and the letter K.org. You can sign up to volunteer. We're going to be, tabling and flyering at different community events this weekend. You could even sign up to just grab 50 flyers, walk around your neighborhood. Like literally anything at this point would be really helpful.
I love it. I don't know. It's just really important stuff like this. And I'm really pulling for you all, obviously. I support everything you're all doing. But folks, yeah, please do get involved if you can on this one. I have actually, and I don't want to like, get this way off, right? I'm no prognosticator, but I've been hearing good things on this, that like the message is getting out pretty well on Measure A and what's wrong with it. So I am cautiously optimistic for y'all. By the time this publishes, there will be just under 2 weeks before the final day of the election. So, talk to everyone, folks, who lives within Sac County about what is wrong with this. Use your platform, find people who do have bigger platforms and ask them to help with that too. And yeah, I also really enjoyed how seamlessly you segged from like who's a part of this to how you can help. You were like, it's almost like you were like one of the hosts of the show. So
It's almost like I'm an organizer.
Yeah, there's a future for you in broadcasts if you want it, I think. Cool. Well, is there anything else you think we need to add on this conversation?
I think we covered it pretty well. Fun fact, I did used to be a radio programmer.
Did you? See?
Yeah, when I went to grad school in Nebraska and was one of the hosts of Earth to Lincoln.
Amazing. Earth to Lincoln. Yeah. I had no broadcast background when I started, when like Skylar and I started running with this thing. And yeah, we just learned as we've gone. But now we are on a radio station, KUTZ-FM, folks. Sacramento Freeform Radio. We are on the episodes are Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock and Friday mornings at 8 o'clock. I think it's 6 o'clock. But I don't know when this episode's coming on because this is a very special one. This is Measure A was really important to us, and we wanted to make sure we got you on the platform for it. So Ilonka, thank you so much for your time and for joining us on this. And I'm sure in the future we'd be happy to have you on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this opportunity to, many of the people that we are trying to reach listen to this show. So we're really hoping that this will help to get the word out, and really appreciate you making this special exemption for us to be on, because as you said, it is a really important message. And honestly, like as soon as people really like know what's going on with Measure A, they're against it. It's just that they've done a good job, right? The other side has done a great job of making it sound good. So, we did get our opposition message into the county voter guide.
Good.
So, you will be able to read in the voter guide our opposition and rebuttal statements in there. So that's another source for people, if they want to point to. For other people, but really appreciate this time, you making the time and bearing with me as I struggled with my microphone and stuff.
Oh no, every single guest goes through it. Don't worry. One more time, tell the listeners and viewers where they can go if they want to volunteer or learn more. MeasureANotOK.org. Awesome. Ilonka, thank you so much. And yeah, folks, 2 weeks to go. Let's fucking run with this.
Let's do it. We can do it. People power.
All right. Bye.